The millionaire is surprised to see a black beggar spending last coins on diapers in the street. Richard Harding, a name whispered in Chicago's skyscrapers, a self-made billionaire, slowed his Bentley to a crawl. Elm Street, usually a blur of neon and late-night diners, held a different kind of scene tonight. Under a flickering streetlight, a woman, slumped against a brick wall, counted pennies with trembling hands. Pennies. This city ate those for breakfast, but it wasn't just the desperation that made Richard's gut clench. It was her face, Sarah. He knew that face. Sarah from Thompson Enterprises, his empire. A worker bee, buzzing with a smile he vaguely remembered from board meetings. Now, her eyes were hollow pits, framed by exhaustion he'd only seen on wartime documentaries. He killed the engine. The silence was deafening. The air hung thick with city grime and a despair he could practically taste. He stepped out, the Italian cashmere of his coat a stark insult to the cracked pavement. "Sarah, is that you?" She flinched, like he'd thrown a brick. Shame and confusion warred on her face. Her fingers, stained with something dark, fumbled with the coins. "Mr. Harding, I didn't expect." A wail, sharp and piercing, cut through the night. It came from a beat-up stroller, tucked in the shadows. Richard saw a tiny bundle, swaddled in a blanket that had seen better days. "You have a child?" His voice, usually a booming command in boardrooms, was barely a whisper. Sarah nodded, tears finally breaking free. "She's sick, Mr. Harding. Real sick. And I don't know what to do." Guilt slammed into him. Thompson Enterprises, restructuring. Danielle, his ambitious niece, leading the charge. Had Sarah been a casualty? He knelt, ignoring the filth that clung to his knees. "What happened, Sarah? Tell me." She hesitated, but under his steady gaze, the story spilled out. The unfair dismissal. Danielle, hungry for a promotion, accusing her of misconduct to bury some shady deal. The desperate job hunt, the dwindling savings, the diapers. The only thing she could afford with her. Last few cents. Richard listened, his jaw tight. Danielle had always been ruthless, but this was a different level. He offered to help, but Sarah recoiled, pride flashing in her tear-filled eyes. "I need a job, Mr. Harding, not charity." He knew she needed more than a handout. She needed justice. A slow smile spread across his face. "I think I have an idea. Be at my office tomorrow morning, 9 sharp." As he turned to leave, a cold knot formed in his stomach. This wasn't just about helping a single mother. This was something bigger, something darker, something that reeked of secrets buried deep within his own family. He slid back into the Bentley, the leather cool against his skin. One question echoed in his mind. Why was Sarah really fired? And what was Danielle trying to hide? "Ei, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários, De qual cidade você está assistindo? Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. He slid back into the Bentley, the leather cool against his skin. One question echoed in his mind. Why was Sarah really fired? And what was Danielle trying to hide? The morning air was crisp, a stark contrast to the grimy night. Richard arrived at Thompson Enterprises, the glass doors reflecting his own grim determination. He bypassed his usual route, heading straight for Danielle's office. She was there, perched behind her oversized desk, phone glued to her ear. "I'll get back to you, Brenda. Thanks." She hung up, a sugary smile plastered on her face. Uncle Richard, what a pleasant surprise. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Sarah Thompson. Why was she fired, Danielle? The smile faltered just for a second. Sarah? Oh, some accounting discrepancies. Nothing major, just sloppiness. We had to let her go. Sloppiness? Richard's voice was low. Dangerous. Or was it because she stumbled onto something you wanted to keep buried? Danielle laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. Uncle, you're being ridiculous. I would never. That's when it happened. The office door burst open, and a man in a rumpled suit stumbled in, eyes wild with panic. He pointed a shaking finger at Danielle. She did it! I saw her! It was Danielle! Security guards swarmed him, but the words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Richard recognized him. Mark, another former Thompson Enterprises employee, a mid-level manager in accounting. He'd seen him around. "What is the meaning of this, Mark?" Danielle's voice was sharp, cutting through the confusion. Mark wrestled free from the guards. "The pension fund, Danielle! You were skimming from the employee pension fund." "Sarah found out. That's why you fired her." "And I saw you. I saw you transferring the money to offshore accounts." The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Richard stared at Danielle, his niece, the woman he'd always trusted. Disbelief warred with a sickening realization. Danielle's composure cracked. Her eyes darted around the room, trapped. "He's lying! He's just trying to get back at me for—" Before she could finish, a scream ripped through the hallway. A blood-curdling, desperate scream. It was coming from Richard's private office. He didn't hesitate. He shoved past the security guards and sprinted down the hall. He burst through the door, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Sarah was there, standing over his desk, a letter opener clutched in her hand. And lying on the floor, bleeding, was Richard's lawyer, David. But that's not what made Richard freeze. It was the look on Sarah's face. It wasn't fear, or anger, or desperation. It was triumph. Cold, calculating triumph. And the letter opener, it wasn't just covered in blood. It was engraved with the Thompson family crest. She looked up at Richard, her eyes glittering. "Hello, Uncle." She looked up at Richard, her eyes glittering. "Hello, Uncle." The world tilted. Uncle? Sarah? The down-on-her-luck single mother, the victim of Danielle's ruthless ambition, was his niece? But how? David, Richard's lawyer, groaned on the floor. The Thompson family crest glinted ominously on the letter opener in Sarah's hand. Everything Richard thought he knew shattered into a million pieces. What is going on?" he stammered, his voice a croak. Sarah's lips curved into a chilling smile. Surprised, Uncle? Let's just say family secrets run deeper than you think. Deeper than even Danielle knows. She glanced down at David, still conscious but bleeding freely. He knows too much. Had to be dealt with. Richard's mind raced. This wasn't about a job or justice. This was something far more sinister. Something that had been brewing for years, hidden in the shadows of the Thompson family empire. But your mother, Richard began, trying to piece together the impossible puzzle. Sarah cut him off with a harsh laugh. My mother? You mean Aunt Carol? Oh, she played her part perfectly. The wrong sister, banished from the family. The poor, struggling artist. Such a convincing act, wasn't it? Aunt Carol, his sister. The black sheep of the family. Exiled years ago after a bitter feud with his father. Could it be? Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the building. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the office into darkness. Screams echoed from the hallway. Something was terribly wrong. Sarah didn't flinch. She grabbed Richard's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Come on, Uncle. We have work to do, and a family reunion to plan. She dragged him towards the fire escape, leaving David bleeding on the floor. As they stumbled through the darkened hallway, Richard caught a glimpse of Danielle, cowering in her office doorway, her face pale with terror. "Richard, help me!" she screamed, but Sarah only tightened her grip, pulling him forward. Outside, chaos reigned. Sirens wailed in the distance. Smoke billowed from the lower floors of Thompson Enterprises. The building was on fire. "What did you do, Sarah?" Richard demanded, his voice trembling. "What have you done?" Sarah smiled, a cold, unsettling smile that sent shivers down his spine. "I'm just reclaiming what's rightfully mine, Uncle, and settling a few old scores. Don't worry, you'll understand soon enough. After all, blood is thicker than water, and the Thompson family, we always pay our debts." Then she shoved him forward, into the darkness, into a world where everything he believed was a lie. What had his family done, and how deep did this conspiracy go? The answer, he feared, would be more horrifying than he could ever imagine. One thing was for sure. This was no longer about Thompson Enterprises. This was a war, a Thompson family war, and he was caught right in the middle. But who was he fighting for? She shoved him forward, into the darkness, into a world where everything he believed was a lie. What had his family done, and how deep did this conspiracy go? The answer, he feared, would be more horrifying than he could ever imagine. One thing was for sure. This was no longer about Thompson Enterprises. This was a war, a Thompson family war, and he was caught right in the middle. But who was he fighting for? The fire escape was slick with rain. Sarah practically dragged him down the metal steps, the building groaning behind them. The air stank of smoke and burning plastic. He stumbled, his expensive shoes useless on the grimy metal. "Where are we going?" he gasped, trying to catch his breath. Sarah ignored him, her eyes fixed on something across the street. A black SUV, parked under a flickering street lamp. Someone was waiting. They reached the bottom of the fire escape, and Sarah pushed him towards the SUV. The back door slid open. Inside, a figure sat in the shadows. "Get in, Uncle," Sarah said, her voice cold. He hesitated. Who was in that car? What was waiting for him? He glanced back at the burning building. The sirens screaming closer. He was trapped. He climbed into the SUV. The door slammed shut. The SUV roared to life and sped away, leaving Thompson Enterprises burning in the rearview mirror. Richard finally got a good look at the figure in the shadows. It was Aunt Carol, his estranged sister, Sarah's mother. But she wasn't alone. Sitting next to her, a gun glinting in the dim light, was a man Richard hadn't seen in years. A man he thought was dead. "Dad?" Richard choked out, his voice barely a whisper. His father, John Thompson, the ruthless patriarch who had built Thompson Enterprises from the ground up. The man who had banished Carol. The man Richard had mourned for the last 10 years. He was alive, and he looked disappointed. "Hello, Richard," John Thompson said, his voice raspy but still commanding. "Long time no see." Richard stared at his father, his mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. He was dead. He'd seen the tombstone, attended the funeral. What was going on? "But how?" he stammered. "You're dead. I saw." His father cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Let's just say appearances can be deceiving, Richard. There were arrangements made for the good of the family." Arrangements? What kind of arrangements could fake a death for 10 years? He looked at Carol, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. He looked at Sarah, her eyes burning with a chilling intensity. He was surrounded by his family, but he had never felt so alone. "You lied to me," he said, his voice trembling with anger and betrayal. "All these years you lied to me?" His father shrugged. "Sometimes, Richard, the truth is too dangerous. You wouldn't have understood." "Understood what?" he demanded. "What is this all about?" The SUV swerved suddenly, throwing Richard against the door. He looked out the window. They were heading away from the city, towards the open countryside, towards something unknown and terrifying. Suddenly, Carol leaned forward, her voice low and menacing. "It's about power, Richard. It's always been about power. And the Thompson family always gets what it wants." Then she said something that made Richard's blood run cold. Something that changed everything. "You always were your mother's favorite. She never truly loved John. You were the true heir." Richard was adopted? His whole life, every memory, every assumption, gone. He wasn't a Thompson at all. He was an outsider, a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. And suddenly, the burning building, the lies, the attempted murder, it all made a twisted kind of sense. It wasn't a Thompson family war. It was a war for the Thompson family. And he wasn't part of it. Or was he? You always were your mother's favorite. She never truly loved John. You were the true heir. The words hung in the air, thicker than the exhaust fumes, choking the countryside road. "I adopted?" My head swam. Everything I thought I knew, gone. Poof, just like that. I looked at my father. This, John Thompson. He just stared back, his eyes like chips of ice. No warmth. No dad. What are you saying?" I managed, my voice cracking. Carol smirked. "Oh, darling Richie, Mummy dearest always had a soft spot for you. Made sure you got the best schools, the fancy suits." Sarah leaned forward, her voice like a viper's hiss. "All part of the plan, Uncle. to make you a worthy puppet. Puppet? Me? I'd built an empire. I'd climbed to the top, and I was just a puppet? The SUV swerved again. My stomach lurched. This wasn't a family reunion. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. The airbag exploded in my face. I coughed, gagged, struggling to see. The SUV was a mangled mess, crumpled against a tree. I pushed the airbag aside and looked around. Carol was slumped in her seat, unconscious. John Thompson, his eyes were open, staring blankly ahead. Dead. Sarah was gone. Panic clawed at my throat. I fumbled with the seatbelt, finally managing to unbuckle. I stumbled out of the wreckage, the smell of gasoline thick in the air. Where was Sarah? Then I saw her, standing on the other side of the road near a parked car. And she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was Danielle, my ambitious niece, the one who had supposedly fired Sarah, the one who I thought was just power-hungry. They were talking, their heads close together. Danielle was smiling. Then Sarah turned and looked at me. Her eyes, they weren't cold anymore. They were pitying. She raised her hand, and in that hand, she held something that made my blood run colder than ice. A gun. And she pointed it at Danielle. Before I could scream, before I could move, she pulled the trigger. Before I could scream, before I could move, she pulled the trigger. Danielle crumpled. Just like that. Sarah hadn't even flinched. My head spun. What the hell was happening? Danielle? Dead? By Sarah? But why? Sarah turned to me, the gun still in her hand. Her face was blank, unreadable. Sorry you had to see that, Uncle Richard. But she knew too much. Too much? About what? This whole thing was spinning out of control. Family. Secrets. Fake deaths. Betrayals. And now murder? Sarah. Why? I croaked. Why are you doing this? She didn't answer. Instead, she tossed the gun into the wrecked SUV, then walked towards Danielle's car. Come on, Uncle. We have to go. Now. I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at Danielle's lifeless body. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of nightmare. Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip like steel. Move it, Richard. We don't have time for this. She dragged me to the car, shoved me into the passenger seat. She jumped in, started the engine, and we sped off into the night. Where are we going? I asked, my voice shaking. Sarah didn't answer. She just kept driving, faster and faster. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but more road. Finally, after what felt like hours, she pulled off the highway onto a dirt road. We bumped along for a while, then stopped in front of a small, run-down cabin. Get out, Sarah said. I hesitated. I didn't trust her. Not one bit. But I was trapped. I got out of the car. Sarah led me to the cabin. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and gestured for me to go inside. The cabin was small and cramped. There was a table, a couple of chairs, and a fireplace. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a dim, flickering light. Sit down, Sarah said, pointing to one of the chairs. I sat down. Sarah stood in front of me, her arms crossed. Okay, Sarah, I said. I want answers. What is going on? Why did you kill Danielle? And what does all this have to do with my Adoptive parents? Sarah sighed. It's a long story, Uncle, but I guess you deserve to know the truth. She paused, took a deep breath, and then she dropped a bombshell. Danielle wasn't skimming the pension fund, she said. She was investigating your mother. My mother? What? What could my mother possibly have to do with all this? She found something, Sarah continued. Something incriminating. Something that could destroy the entire Thompson family. What was it? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah looked me straight in the eye. Your mother, she said, her voice barely a whisper, was the one who killed John Thompson's real son. She had you take his place. The room spun. It couldn't be real. My mother, a murderer? And I replacing someone who had been killed? I barely had time to process that thought when she continued with the most shocking revelation. Of all, you aren't Richard Harding, nor are you a Thompson. Your name is Daniel, and you are my brother. You aren't Richard Harding, nor are you a Thompson. Your name is Daniel, and you are my brother. Brother? Me? The guy who ran Thompson Enterprises, who was about to inherit everything, was really just some nobody named Daniel? And Sarah, the woman who just offed Danielle like it was swatting a fly, was my sister? My head swam. The cabin seemed to shrink, the air getting thick and heavy. I felt like I was gonna be sick. What are you talking about? I stammered. This isn't possible. Sarah just stared at me, her expression hard. It's true, Daniel. Mom, she couldn't tell you. It was too dangerous. But you had to know, eventually. Mom? Was she talking about Carol? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah nodded. Yeah, Mom. She did what she had to do to protect us, to make sure we had a better life. Better life? By killing people? By faking identities? By turning my whole world upside down? Protect us from what? I demanded. From the Thompsons? But they gave me everything. They raised me. They used you, Sarah cut in, her voice sharp. They wanted a successor, someone they could control. And you were perfect. Handsome, ambitious, and completely clueless. Clueless. That stung. But was she right? Had I been played all along? I stood up, pacing the small cabin. This was too much. Too fast. I needed to think. I don't believe you, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. This is insane. I'm leaving. I turned to walk out the door, but Sarah blocked my way. You can't leave, Daniel, she said, her voice low. It's not safe. Not for you, not for me. Safe from who? From the Thompsons? They're all dead. Sarah shook her head. Not all of them. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a photo. She handed it to me. I looked at it. It was a picture of John Thompson, my adoptive father. But it wasn't recent. It was old, really old. And standing next to him was a woman. A woman I'd never seen before. A woman who looked familiar. Who is this? I asked, pointing to the woman in the photo. Sarah took a deep breath. That, she said, her voice trembling, is Margaret Thompson, John's wife, and your real mother. My real mother? But Carol was... Sarah held up a hand to stop me. Carol isn't our mother, Daniel. She's our aunt. And Margaret, she's been alive all along. Alive? Everyone thought she was dead. Died in a car accident years ago. She faked her death, Sarah said, reading my mind. Just like John faked his. They're both still out there, Daniel, and they're coming for us. Coming for us? But why? What did they want? Then Sarah said something that made my blood run colder than ice. And they're not alone. They have him. She said it with a mix of fear and reverence. Who was him? Suddenly, the cabin door burst open. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. Tall, imposing, and familiar. But it couldn't be. It just couldn't be. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the figure in disbelief, because standing in the doorway was me. But not me. Not exactly. This version of me was older, harder, more menacing, and he was holding a gun. "Hello, Daniel," he said, his voice a chilling echo of my own. "Ready to meet your brother?" "Hello, Daniel," he said, his voice a chilling echo of my own. "Ready to meet your brother?" Brother? This guy, this twisted version of me, was my brother? How many siblings did I have? What kind of messed up family was this? He smirked, a cruel, unsettling smirk. "Surprised? I bet you are. Margaret always had a flair for the dramatic, keeping us apart all these years. Classic." Margaret, my real mother. She'd orchestrated all this entire insane charade? Sarah stepped forward, her hand reaching for a knife strapped to her leg. "Get out of here, Ethan. He's not ready yet." Ethan, so that was his name. Ethan, my brother. He laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Oh, I think he is. Don't you, Daniel? You're about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole goes." He raised his gun, pointing it not at me, but at Sarah. "Sorry, sis," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But Mom's orders. Can't leave any loose ends." "No," I lunged forward, tackling Ethan to the ground. The gun went flying. We wrestled. A brutal, desperate fight for survival. He was stronger than he looked, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. Sarah scrambled for the knife, her face pale with fear. "Daniel, get away from him! He's insane!" Insane? Maybe. But he was also my brother, and I couldn't just let him kill her. Ethan landed a blow to my jaw. I tasted blood. I fought back, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need to protect Sarah. Suddenly, Ethan stopped fighting. He smiled, a truly unsettling smile. "Too late, Daniel," he whispered. "Too late for what?" Then I heard it. A high-pitched whine growing louder and louder. A sound I knew all too well. Sirens, but not just police sirens. Something else. Louder, more urgent. Ethan grinned. "They're here," he said. "Mom sent backup." Backup? Who the hell was coming? The cabin door burst open again, but this time it wasn't just one person. It was a whole damn army. Men in black suits, armed to the teeth. They stormed the cabin, yelling orders. "Secure the target. Eliminate all threats." They grabbed me and Ethan, pulling us apart. They restrained Sarah, her eyes wide with terror. What was happening? Then I saw her, standing behind the soldiers, her face a mask of cold determination. Margaret Thompson, my real mother. She walked towards me, her eyes fixed on my face. She reached out and touched my cheek. "Hello, Daniel," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Welcome home." Then she turned to the soldiers. "Take them both," she said, her voice cold and Commanding. We have a lot to discuss. And Daniel, there's someone you need to meet. Someone who's been waiting a long time for you. She paused, a chilling smile spreading across her face. Your father, Victor Harding. What? Victor Harding, thought to be dead, was alive? But then, there came a voice, deep, gravely, and undeniably familiar. Mom, I think you've got the wrong guy. It was my voice? No, that voice came from behind her as she stepped aside, and oh my God! Victor Harding was me from an alternate universe. Mom, I think you've got the wrong guy. It was my voice. No, that voice came from behind her as she stepped aside, and oh my God! Victor Harding was me from an alternate universe. My head exploded. Alternate universe? What in the actual hell was going on? It was me, but different, older, harder. A scar bisected his left eyebrow. His eyes, they held a coldness I'd never seen in my own reflection. What is this? I stammered, unable to take my eyes off him. Off me? Margaret smiled, a chillingly proud smile. This, Daniel, is what you were always meant to be. The real Victor Harding. The real Victor Harding? But how could there be two of us? This was insane. Completely and utterly insane. The alternate me stepped forward, his gaze piercing. Don't look so shocked, kid. You've been living my life. Now it's time to give it back. Give it back? What did that even mean? I was drowning in a sea of revelations, each more unbelievable than the other. Last, Sarah was staring at him, her face a mix of fear and something else. Longing? Was she in on this too? Mom, what are you doing? She pleaded. This isn't right. He's still Daniel. He's our brother. Margaret brushed her aside like an annoying fly. Silence, Sarah. You've served your purpose. Now step aside and let the real power take its place. Real power? What was this all about? Family? Or some twisted game for control? The alternate me, Victor, pulled out a small device from his pocket. It looked like a remote control. Time to switch things up, Daniel, he said, his voice laced with menace. Time to go home. Go home? Where was home for him? And what was that device? He pressed a button. A blinding light filled the cabin. A deafening roar ripped through the air. I felt a searing pain, like my very being was being torn apart. Then, nothing. Darkness. Silence. I woke up, lying in a bed, in a room I didn't recognize. It was clean, sterile, white. A woman stood over me. She was older, her face familiar. Welcome back, Victor, she said, her voice soft. It's good to have you home. She reached out and touched my face. Mom? I whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. Yes, Victor, I'm here. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I looked down at my hands. They were different. Older. Stronger. Scared. I looked in the mirror. The face that stared back wasn't mine. It was the alternate me, Victor Harding. I was in his body, in his world, and I had no idea where Sarah was, or what the hell was going on. But one thing was for sure. This was just the beginning. O que era real? Onde estava Sarah? A mulher sorriu. Descanse, Vitor. Está tudo bem agora. Mas não estava. Nada estava bem. Eu não era Vitor. Eu era Danielle. Ou pelo menos, era quem eu achava que era. Levantei da cama, cambaleando. Precisava saber o que tinha acontecido com Sarah, com Carol, com aquele lunático do meu irmão. A mulher tentou me impedir, mas eu a afastei. Eu precisava sair dali. Precisava de respostas. O corredor era longo e branco. As portas todas iguais. Para onde ir? De repente ouvi vozes, vindo de uma sala no fim do corredor. Parei hesitante. Ele está se recuperando bem, Margaret. Uma voz masculina disse. Era familiar. Horrivelmente familiar. Sim, John. A voz de Margaret respondeu. Em breve ele estará pronto para assumir o lugar que é dele por direito. John? Margaret? Eles estavam vivos. E juntos. Me aproximei da porta, cauteloso. Espiei para dentro. Lá estavam eles, John e Margaret Thompson. Meus pais. E sentada entre eles, Sarah. Ela parecia vazia, sem vida. Seus olhos, antes cheios de fogo, agora eram opacos. Sarah? Sussurrei, abrindo a porta. Todos se viraram para me encarar. O choque estampado em seus rostos. Danielle? Sarah disse, sua voz fraca. John sorriu. Um sorriso frio e predatório. Veja, Margaret. Ele se lembrou. Margaret se levantou e veio até mim. Bem-vindo de volta, Danielle. Ou devo dizer, Victor. Ela tentou tocar meu rosto, mas eu me esquivei. Eu não era Victor. Eu nunca seria Victor. Onde estamos? Eu perguntei, minha voz tremendo. O que vocês fizeram com Sarah? Margaret riu. Sarah está onde sempre deveria estar. Ao nosso lado, pronta para servir a família. Sarah não disse nada. Ela apenas olhou para mim com aqueles olhos vazios. Eu não entendia. Nada fazia sentido. O que era verdade? O que era mentira? De repente, uma sirene soou do lado de fora, alta e estridente. Os rostos de John e Margaret se contorceram em fúria. O que está acontecendo? John gritou. A porta se abriu e um dos homens de preto entrou correndo. Eles estão aqui. A polícia e outras pessoas. Outras pessoas? Quem? Então eu soube. Uma certeza gelada me invadiu. Eles não estavam sozinhos. Antes que eu pudesse reagir, a porta explodiu. E no meio da fumaça e do caos estava Carol. E atrás dela, Danielle. Viva. Como? Mas essa é outra história. E você precisa se inscrever agora para não perder os próximos capítulos inéditos e reveladores dessa saga alucinante. Esmague o botão de like agora mesmo para alimentar o algoritmo faminto e garantir que essa história chegue a mais pessoas. Inunde a seção de comentários com suas teorias mirabolantes e reações explosivas sobre esse final inacreditável. E não espere nem mais um segundo. Compartilhe instantaneamente este vídeo com pelo menos 5 amigos que precisam conhecer esse desfecho bombástico. Só os verdadeiros fãs sabem a importância de apoiar o canal com essas ações. Mostra que você é um deles. Vamos lá!